Hello, everyone. My name is Seth Green, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the We Are Still In panel. I just want to clarify from the outset that this is not about the NCAA performance of our Ramblers, but we hope that the We Are Still In movement at the tournament continues for a while to come. We are here talking about an equally exciting We Are Still In movement, which is a group of institutions that have decided in the face of our federal government removing itself from the Paris Accord to stay in that accord and to be part of the long-term solution to the climate change issue that you all have been hearing a lot about over the last 24 hours. And we're really excited as we move from kind of really diagnosing and understanding the problem and the impact on human health that climate change has, to present to you this afternoon a panel that will look at how we begin to solve at scale these core issues that our globe faces. I am going to be very brief in my remarks as a moderator, both because you may hear in my voice a bit of laryngitis that I am hopefully getting over, and because we have a really excellent panel, including one member who is still making her way over here, coming from another gathering. I will introduce the panelists by name. You all, I believe, have them as well in programs that you may see online. But the first question I'm going to actually have for our panelists is for them to tell you about themselves. I always think that a kind of self-biographical tale is more interesting for you all than to hear me list out affiliations. So I'll give you their current affiliation, but then they'll be sharing their journey in a moment. So right here we have Aaron Durnbaugh, who is the Sustainability Director here at Loyola. Next to him we have Tim Frick, who is the CEO of Mightybytes. And next to him we have Bob Best, who is the Sustainability Lead at JLL. And again, Amy Jewell, who is the Synergy Energy Provider and Advisor to the City, will be coming momentarily. So I want to start with that opening question of kind of introduction and ask you in 3 minutes or less to say who you are, the institution that you represent, and what is your high-level approach at that institution to sustainability. And Bob, can I start with you at the end, and then maybe by the time we get to Amy's seat, she'll be here.
Okay. My name is Bob Best, and I've been at JLL 31 years, which means most of you were not born when I started. And during that period of time, did quite a number of different things, managing buildings and so forth, because JLL is a big real estate services company, and got involved with the sustainability part of our business about 10 years ago, when it was starting to really generate interest in the corporate community. So my perspective is, how do you get sustainability into the corporate world? And there is only one way to do it: money. You have to show the return on investment for anything you do. We tried. We went in and talked about saving the earth. I don't know what planet they think they're going to be living on, but we got nowhere. And we talked about social responsibility, and you get the eye wink, and so we gave up, and we talk about money. And everything we do has to have a reasonable return on investment. And if it does, you can get the capital dollars and the attention from the clients to actually invest in sustainability. What that's meant in our world is you're mostly focusing on energy, because that's where the big dollars are, and that's where you can prove that you can make a financial impact. So that's what we've been doing mostly up through the last couple of years. So now I'm going to address your question. What's the big broad thing that we're looking at now? What we've discovered in the workplace is, if you make the workplace greener, more sustainable, you got to have faith here, the people in the workplace are far more productive than the non-green space. That's where the big money is. If you can make people even a fraction of a % more productive with better indoor air quality, temperature control, daylighting, and believe me, the research is there. You can prove people are far more productive in a sustainable environment. That washes away everything else. I love energy. Let's save money. That's pennies a square foot. I'm talking of hundreds of dollars per square foot per year. So any of you familiar with the Harvard Indoor Air Quality Study from 2015? That rocked our business. And it's moving forward. They're now in phase 3, and they're taking it beyond indoor air quality. But the whole premise is tie sustainable workplaces with more productive people, make it measurable, and turn it into dollars. That's the secret.
Thank you. Tim?
Can you guys hear me? Better? Nope, it's not even on, is it? No, okay. All right, well, I'll just talk loud. Hi. My name's Tim. I own a digital agency on the north side called Mightybytes, and we're almost completely polar opposite of that.
We still love it.
I know. Not that sustainability is a core value at my company, but we take a completely different, much more kind of granola crunchy approach to it. We're definitely about the kind of save the earth and save the planet kind of stuff. We're a digital agency, so we build websites. We run digital marketing campaigns for our clients, many of whom are nonprofits. Lots of sustainable brands, conscientious companies, et cetera. We are a certified B Corp. I'm not sure if anybody here knows what that is, but that means that every 2 years we go through a really rigorous assessment where we're aligning the triple bottom line with our business values and how we pursue profit and purpose alongside one another. We co-host the local B Corp meetup group here in town with a couple other B Corps. Companies like Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, Warby Parker, Eileen Fisher, a bunch of B Corps. There's about 2,500 around the globe. We've got about 35 or so here in Illinois. So that's kind of, we co-host the B Corp group and do the digital agency stuff during the daytime. As where sustainability kind of fits in with us is it's a really a core value, and we use it as a kind of catalyst for innovation. So when we became a certified B Corp in 2011, we went through some rather eye-opening questions, because it's not just about environmental sustainability, it's about social and environmental across the board and in multiple pillars around what your role is within your community, how you treat your workers, how you govern your organization, how, of course, environmental sustainability is a part of that. But because of many of those eye-opening questions, we were like, well, how do we apply that to what we do? All we need is pixels and people, really. So what's the deal there? Well, it turns out the internet has a larger environmental impact than the airline industry. And that's the thing that we build for a living every day. So we're like, great, how do we actually apply that to what we're doing? And so we started off with making sure that everything that we hosted was hosted powered by renewable energy. And then we built this product called EcoGrader, which allows you to basically put the URL of your website in, and it runs a crawl of your website, and it tells you how sustainable it is and how you can make it more efficient and power it with renewable energy. So for us, sustainability is just kind of built into all the things that we do, and we're constantly having conversations about how can we, push the envelope a little bit and also help our clients understand, that the internet has a large environmental impact, and it's not just the kind of vapory pixels that nobody thinks about.
Great, thanks. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I see a lot of friendly faces out there. My name's Aaron. I work here at Loyola. So you all know what Loyola is, so I don't have to answer the question.
So I'm here at Loyola, and I don't know fully our sustainability strategy. We'll play me as the only ignorant one in the room.
Well, I must still have some work to do then. So the folks here at Loyola don't quite know what we're. So I'll just say real quickly, I've been here 6 years. I've been working as the Director of Sustainability here since 2012. I came to Loyola after having worked at the City of Chicago for 10 years. I had the pleasure of working on the 2008 Climate Action Plan and helping head up our adaptation planning for that, so our resilience work. So it's terrific when I get to talk on climate resilience, which is not the topic of today, but it definitely dovetails in with the climate mitigation and greenhouse gas reduction conversations we'll be having in a second. I guess the strategy for sustainability at Loyola is very simple. It's that we do sustainability as social justice. Our goal for sustainability is to bring sustainability, a quality of life, and equity and equitability to all people on the planet. Of course, our forum for doing that is a university. It's in higher education. So we do organize that in some ways because we're a university, but really it's grounded in our mission, our identity, our history of being an institution directed towards social justice. How we organize that is a couple different ways. Because we are a university, one of them is campus's laboratory, so trying to find opportunities in the actual infrastructure, so in buildings. You see some of that demonstrated on campus as you walk across, but also in some of the less tangible things, so data. We generate a lot of data, whether it's with energy or water or curriculum, courses, and so we can use that as an opportunity to engage students on these topics. Sustainability across the curriculum, so how is sustainability a topic of interest for all the teaching and research going on here, not just limited to some of the maybe cliche or usual suspects departments like the natural sciences or maybe business, but how do we partner with psychology, sociology, ethics, theology, medicine, public health. Certainly how we prepare our students for their careers. While I think we do a good job here at Loyola of preparing students for their careers, I think trying to create skills to be change agents, to work in a much more interdisciplinary way when they graduate can be a challenge. And I think sustainability brings some very unique tools to that discussion. And then how we get into communities. If we make Loyola sort of a sustainability exemplar on a hill, we will have failed. If we are not doing it in Edgewater and Rogers Park and Garfield Park and Rome and Ho Chi Minh and other places where Loyola is at work, then we are not really doing our job. The last thing I'll say is that we're really organized around climate. Our greenhouse gas goals, we review every year. We adopted our climate action plan in 2015. I have a copy of it right here, but it's available online for anyone to see. We have a carbon neutrality goal of 2025, and we work every day to reduce those emissions, to prepare for the impacts of climate change, and engage all of you while we do it.
Well, thank you, and we'll make sure when Amy gets here to hear her story, but to kind of move on to the big question of this panel, why are you still in? So, do you have a history of being involved in politics, for example? And, why this issue? Why now? You each shared your general sustainability strategy, but it's an additional step to go online or make the declaration that you are officially still in. You know what? We have our fourth panelist just in time. So we actually just finished the first question, but before we move on to the second one, do you mind if we put you on the spot immediately?
No worries.
Okay.
Remind me of the question.
Yeah. See, you need to be a high energy person to be in this work. A little bit of a pun, but it may have been lost. So. Amy, first question for you is to tell us who you are, what kind of institution you represent or advise in your case, and then, what's the high-level sustainability strategy at that institution, for example, the city of Chicago.
Gotcha. All right. Can everybody hear me? Yes? I see heads nodding. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy Jewell, and so I work for an organization called the City Energy Project. We are working, it's a nonprofit partnership, and we're working with 20 cities across the U.S. on their energy efficiency and energy policy strategies. So Chicago is one of the cities we're working with. And so through that, I focus specifically on advising the city of Chicago on its energy efforts, everything from energy efficiency to increasing and accelerating renewable energy and energy codes and lots of different things like that. So what was the second part of the question? Remind me?
Well, so talk about the city's sustainability strategy and what it looks like. This is the strategy, by the way, that Aaron helped to set up when he was there.
Exactly.
So we have to be careful. She knows that, one of their historical figures is in the room next to her.
In all of this work, I think we borrow, meaning stealing ideas from each other, and we build on the work of those that came before us. So I am very grateful for those who have been working on this for years and even decades. But I think that the city sees itself as leading on this issue in a lot of different ways. Cities actually, there's a lot of different ways that they can start to really tackle these issues. I work specifically on energy, as I mentioned, but cities work on waste and recycling, transportation, land use, and many other things as well. And we can get into that into more details. So I think that there's no single answer, but really a multi-pronged strategy when it comes to the city and what it's trying to do.
Well, so coming back to that question of why you're still in, and we'll start, Bob, again with you if you're up for it. Why did your institution, you're a large business serving large business clients, and it's obviously a decision to come out in a essentially political way. What led JLL to join the We Are Still In movement? It's one of the largest groups to have done so.
Right. So the group I head up is known as Energy and Sustainability Services, and it's probably 130 full-time people. So what we're doing, you have to look at what's our business. People that own real estate hire us to help them with real estate needs. One of those is management, so we manage buildings. One of the biggest budget items in a building is energy. And believe it or not, you could take just about any building in the country, and if you really put your mind to it, you should be able to cut the energy consumption 40, 50%. It takes diligence, it takes investment, and it takes people who know what they're doing. So the answer for us is everything we do is driven by what our clients want. They love saving money. So part of our program is, and it's a big part of our program, when you manage a building, you do a lot of things. You clean the building, you landscape, you provide security. One place where you can save the most money is energy. So that's why we've invested heavily in energy, so that we can talk to our clients about what we bring to the table in terms of economic value. What I talked about before is a much harder argument to make, which is we can make the people in the building more productive. And believe it or not, the answer we usually get is, no, you're here to manage the building, not the people in the building. So we're trying to change the conversation to say those two things actually go together. And you do want to talk to us about this, because we're learning as much as we can, as fast as we can, to make the tie. So I was going to quote one study, because most people are very skeptical when you say productivity. What is it? Define it. Think about yourselves. Are you more productive than you were today than you were yesterday? It's a dumb question, because you're doing too many different things. So what the research is doing is breaking productivity down into its components. And you can test those. So California Energy Commission years ago took kids taking the SAT test and put them in two different rooms, one with daylight and one with artificial light. Guess what the difference was? 7 to 18% higher scores in the daylight room. Why? Nobody knows. There's something magical about daylighting, but that's why it's part of our world. Let's bring more, here, you're doing it here. Bring daylight in, it's good for people. So that's my answer.
And specifically, can you just address why you decided to join We Are Still In? So why be part of that movement explicitly, in addition to having that as your core sustainability strategy?
Okay, so that's the answer to that, beyond it's good for business, is, and I think part of this is a personal question for me, I'm still in it because the world needs us now, more than ever. If you look at what's going on with the EPA, sorry to get political, it's getting boned and filleted. And we've got to speak up and take a stand, because now's the time. So that's what we've decided. We're gonna take a leadership position.
And just to give everyone an additional evidence point, Edelman recently put out their trust barometer, and they look at 4 groups every year: government, the NGO sector, the media, and business. And this is the first year in their 18-year history that in the U.S., business was actually the most trusted source of information. Government.
How did that happen?
Government took a nosedive, but interestingly, so did NGOs that are viewed, I guess, as more political. What then they said was that people expected business to be speaking out more on objectively important issues, and this was one that they highlighted. Tim?
Yeah, I think that's a really important issue. I mean, for me personally, it's a more visceral thing. I've been to protests and lobbying Congress and all that kind of stuff many times personally as a business and as part of the B Corp movement. We kind of all collectively signed, the B Corps collectively signed that document. I think we had signed the one prior to that as well. My company did. It's really, as Bob was saying, just about making change happen and making it happen as quickly as possible and doing whatever we can to have that happen. And so, supporting our team internally and supporting our community as much as we can in making sure that kind of sustainability is something that's woven into the values of all the things that we do and all of the people that we touch,
So, switching gears a little bit, as a university, right, as an educational institution, this may surprise folks here, whether either students or folks not from the Loyola community, but universities aren't very advocacy-driven. We tend not to speak up politically unless it's about things that directly impact our students. So you can imagine whether it's funding through Department of Education or whether it's something related to status of our students. We tend to not be very active. Our administrations tend to be a little bit more conservative in the things that they will go sort of get involved, whether it's in Springfield or DC or even locally. However, that being said, Loyola has made a commitment. Our climate action plan in 2015, we've made very specific statements. Our current president, President Joanne Rooney, has made statements about our commitment to address climate change, the way it will impact our students. Obviously, most of the threat, most of the risk of climate change, even though it's happening right now, it's to be felt into the future, which is where hopefully we're preparing you to be successful. You can't do that in a changing climate with reduced resources. So we also, very much see the impacts of climate change here on our campus. We see it in our infrastructure. We see it in our financial resources. We see it in all kinds of ways. So that's why climate has been one of the areas why we have taken action. We're lucky that there is a group who helps sort of coordinate, and I know business has this and government has this, helps coordinate universities so that we don't have to track sort of every piece of legislation, everything that's happening at the UN, and a group called Second Nature, and we've been active participants in Second Nature since I got here in 2012. So our commitments sort of also help become aligned with the other 300 universities who signed on to We Are Still In.
Great, and as you speak, Amy, I just want to highlight that Chicago is not only part of We Are Still In, but was the host of a major gathering just a few months ago.
Yeah, I can talk a little about that too. So I think shifting gears again, of course, mayors across the U.S. are political people. They work in political ways. So certainly there's a political aspect to this. But just in December, the city of Chicago hosted the North American Climate Summit. And I think the goal of that was, I think it's over 250 mayors had already signed We Are Still In. But then they woke up the next day, or the city manager, who the second in charge, woke up the next day and said, what does that mean? So the goal of the North American Climate Summit, in my mind, was helping to explain and further create more detailed commitments around what it still means to be We Are Still In. So that was a one-day summit with over 50 mayors from US, Canada, and Mexico. It was a North American Climate Summit. And they all signed something called the Chicago Climate Charter, which you can look up. You can look at it online. So it gives a more specific set of commitments around things like, of course, trying to tackle climate change, trying to reach the goals of the Paris commitment. So for us, that's 26 to 28% reduction by 2025. But also to advocate at the state and federal levels so local governments can be empowered to make the changes they need to hit those targets. And to partner with other groups like academic institutions, like business, and others in the community to hit these goals. So that's what the North American Climate Summit was all about. And I'd say that in addition to the political issues, there are so many reasons why cities are on the forefront of this. I think that a lot of people see it as, the challenge of our generation, and so it's definitely the sort of the right thing to do. There's like a moral and ethical issue. But when you look, and also cities are seeing the impacts every day of climate change and starting to see it in their infrastructure, and in their facilities. But when you also look at the flip side, you look at the benefits of something like improving energy efficiency. Yes, you're reducing carbon. You're also generating clean local jobs. You're reducing air pollution. You could be reducing the number of asthma cases and trips to the emergency room, you're improving public health, you're addressing equality if you do it in the right way. So there's all these benefits to addressing these issues and becoming a more sustainable city. So I mean, I think that the reasons are many-fold as to why cities are in the forefront of this.
And just to piggyback on that, you're probably familiar with this as well, that cities of any level of governmental institution have been the most involved. And part of that has to do with the fact that our cities are now generally more progressive because of the way that urban demographic trends have changed those issues.
Yeah, I would add, though, when you look at infrastructure. Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll pull the microphones closer. Thank you for that. And I was worried I was going to be the one that couldn't be heard on this panel. So, well, let me start back with you, Amy, because I think it is interesting to think about what exactly does being We Are Still In mean. So during that day-long conference in your role as an energy advisor, what does it mean for the city to be part of We Are Still In? How are they tracking that, and how is it actually leading to decisions on the ground?
I think the tracking is the easy answer, and that's just doing what they call a greenhouse gas inventory on a regular basis. Oh, can you hear me now?
I don't think that one's.
Oh, hello?
Is that one?
Is this the only one that's on?
Okay.
All right, we
All
can
right.
make
We
that
can
work.
also just take it out of stand.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. How's that? Is that better? All right, good.
Sorry.
So, sorry about that.
One mic uses less energy, so consider it a conservation effort.
We're being more efficient. Okay. So let's see. What was I talking about? I don't even remember.
What does it mean to be part of We Are Still In?
Okay. So from a city's perspective, I think there's different ways to get at this. I think Chicago sees itself as a leader and leading by example. So one of the things that was announced last year is the mayor committed that all city buildings would be 100% powered by renewable energy for all electricity needs by 2025. So that's all police stations, libraries, city hall, schools, you name it. So that's one of the big commitments that came out of 2017.
And there are a few cities that have already done that, right?
And there are a few cities that have committed.
Okay.
I don't
committed.
think very many have achieved it.
Okay.
And so this is where we get into the details of renewable energy. Some of the cities and businesses that have gotten there are buying renewable energy credits. So that's one way to get there. But we're really hoping to focus on new development of renewable energy as well. So that's one tangible thing. And one of the things we're thinking about, it hasn't fully launched yet, but I think it will in the next few months, is a renewable energy challenge. So this is where we're leading by example, and now we're asking businesses or local institutions to follow that lead or to join that commitment. So we're going to challenge local businesses and other local institutions to also hit 100% renewable by 2025, 2030, or 2035. And we're going to try to create a lot of momentum around this, and then provide some assistance where we can to educate people on how to do it and create resources and things like that. So that's just one example of what I think it still means to be We Are Still In.
See how many glasses we can break.
Yeah, right. So I sort of mentioned it, but I think our climate action plan, which we adopted in 2015, is sort of the simple answer of what it means for a university. Climate action plan that has a carbon neutrality goal. It addresses sort of how we engage and do outreach around climate science, how we make sure it's reflected in our courses, our curriculum, and all of our sort of educational programming, like today. But I guess, just to give a few maybe more concrete examples, things you might see on campus. Of course, we have a large energy master plan for steps we're taking right here on this campus. It will reduce the energy use just here on Lakeshore campus by 20% by 2020, and that was just adopted last year, so it's relatively recent, but it's more aggressive across 24 buildings. We have some other clean energy strategies we're exploring. We're not ready to make any announcements yet, but we've been working very hard on understanding what all the opportunities are with our new state energy bill, Future Energy Jobs Act, and all the programs and both financial and sort of other legislative opportunities that will develop from that. But a lot of them are, this in-between piece. So how do we work with the Edgewater community, help them think about what they want to do to prepare or become more efficient in the face of climate change? We were able to win an award last year from the American Catholic Colleges and Universities for climate leadership. We were the only Catholic university recognized amongst 20 schools that applied. And with that came a little money. And so we were able to hire some students. And they're currently doing energy audits and working within the Archdiocese of Chicago, parish by parish, to benchmark the facilities, meaning they basically track the energy use in an online web-based tool, and also set forward some energy efficiency goals sort of parish by parish. So it's a good partnership, sort of stays true to our mission as a Catholic institution. But those are some of the examples of what We Are Still In means for Loyola.
For our company, it was a no-brainer to do the We Are Still In thing. We are very kind of triple bottom line forward in all of our messaging. Our company tagline is a better digital agency for people and planet. We won an Illinois Sustainability Award in October and stuff. So we're really kind of very, very forward in how we do all of that. In the B Corp community, we like to think of ourselves as a kind of movement of movements. So there's fair trade, there's conscious capitalism, there's all of these movements that are all kind of working on various components of a better future for all of us. And so, that just being, to us, it's just the We Are Still In as one component of a much larger movement to just make sure that, in our case, it's using business as a force for good, but we connect with the fair trade folks and all of the other folks to make sure that we're partnering on ideas and events and that kind of stuff. So that's what it means for us.
So I've already talked about the business angle, so I'll switch gears since we seem to be switching a lot of gears. Anyway, talk about people. So in the world today, we have about 80,000 employees. And one of the things we're becoming more and more aware of is you've got to get and keep great employees. And one of the things they look at is how socially responsible are you as a company. And it's an interesting trend. People are choosing where they work based on many things, but one is the corporate personality. And what we've decided is we want our corporate personality to reflect our commitment to the environment and to sustainability. So this is just one way to do that. But that does get finally back to it's good business. So we're doing it for a good business reason.
Well, so just to get our audience moving a little bit, I want to test out Bob's hypothesis here. How many of you, especially our Loyola students, would be more likely to work for a company that has a commitment to sustainability? Raise your hands.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe a little bit of a biased sample size, given this is a climate change conference.
Ask them who wouldn't.
Yeah, who wouldn't? And then who here considers that important when you were choosing a university? A lot of hands. And what about a city when you're thinking about where you want to live? So I think that is a great point, and just to say out loud, your generation is reshaping the business case and the city case and the higher ed case. And all of these institutions are ultimately with visions, but adaptive to their clients. And so you all are helping to change the system. And that's a good segue to the last question I have, and so I hope you all are getting your questions ready, which is about kind of how we scale this movement, how we get more businesses and institutions and, for example, state governments to be part of We Are Still In, maybe one day our federal government again. And then is there a way that folks who are here in the audience can help and can be part of this movement? And we'll go in popcorn style this time. So whoever's ready.
I can talk about this one. We partner a lot with the Illinois Green Alliance, the B Corps that is. We produce quarterly events talking about B Corps, connecting B Corps with other B Corps to do business, that kind of thing. But we partner with we've partnered with Conscious Capitalism, Illinois Green Alliance, a number of chambers of commerce, green restaurant associations. We basically, for us, it's really all about partnerships and making sure that there's kind of cross-pollination between all the groups so everybody knows what everybody else is doing, but also that we're able to kind of share our constituents and share ideas and share the stuff that's really important. So for us, it's really about partnering with the other organizations and letting the people who come to our events know about not only what we're doing, but the people that we're partnering with as well. So, anybody else? Sure.
So as we've all been talking about, this is happening at the federal, the state, and the local level. Our viewpoint is the real battleground's the local level. This is where you can have the biggest impact. You know, City of Chicago, you have the Chicago Benchmarking Ordinance. There's a lot of local programs. You get to know the people in the mayor's office, like Amy, and that's a real powerful thing. So right now what we're saying through our company is if you're in Houston, get involved with the Houston. If you're in Chicago or New York, get involved locally where you can make personal connections and you can actually see the impact of what you're doing. So I'm not saying ignore federal or state, it's just city seems to be a really good place for the focal point right now.
And so we go to two local leaders here to share ideas.
Well, with scaling, it's an interesting piece because it's also how do you not leave others behind? And so what are our obligations, those of us who have the capacity to sort of ask these questions and advance these ideas within our institutions? How do you also think about doing it in a way or leaving breadcrumbs for others to follow? And so that's just something that I sort of struggle with and think about, even just within our 28 Jesuit colleges. We've tried, and some of the other sort of leading schools, some of the folks who are here in the room, have really tried to say, how can we as a 28 group cohort address some of these matters together? I want to answer the second question, though, which is how all you can help. And I think while it's important to think about the leaders in these institutions making choices, in companies or in government making choices, I'm going to go back to sort of something Seth said, which is all of you have incredibly powerful voices. When the sustainability director says, oh, you know what, I think we should do this sustainability thing, they go, well, of course you would, right? Versus someone who doesn't have that as their title or maybe isn't identified with that, but they bring up a voice or bring up a point in a board meeting or in a community meeting somewhere for their municipality. I think you might feel like that's not the area that you are most confident in or the area that you maybe even are most passionate in, but you bring a very important voice if you're from maybe not perceived as normally speaking in that arena. So I would encourage you to kind of get outside your comfort zone sometimes on these topics and speak up, because I think you can actually be heard quite a bit louder than the expert, so to speak.
Got a question over there.
Great, we'll have you speak and then we'll get to your question in a moment.
Great. You started with the softball question, which is tell them my name and what I do, and then you ended with the hardest question. So scaling is the big challenge, I think. And when I think of the city's efforts, there's been a lot of success. Bob mentioned the benchmarking ordinance, so that's a city law that requires all owners of large buildings to measure and report their energy use once a year. And then there's various programs, most of which are voluntary on top of that. I think where I see it going is continuing those programs, expanding, but possibly more mandatory approaches. In order to scale, we're going to have to get a lot more people involved. And I think the voluntary approach has been really successful, especially improving the case. This isn't really that hard to do, to make your building more energy efficient or to cut emissions in other ways. And so we've got all the case studies out there now from those voluntary programs. Let's move forward and make it required for more people. And that's kind of where I see it going in terms of scaling, but absolutely agree. We need to think about equality. We need to make sure this touches everyone. We need to make sure that if we're creating jobs by doing this, that those are spread around and really every neighborhood across the city benefits from it.
Absolutely.
How to get involved, I think, again, I'm going to echo what I heard, but partnerships and certainly using your voice, finding something that maybe you are passionate about and advocating for change is so powerful. So don't sell yourself short, and there's so many different ways to get involved. And you could start with the nonprofit like Illinois Green Alliance or one of the other ones that were mentioned, or there's many, many other groups out there.
So I'm going to suggest one way that you can get involved. It takes you 10 minutes every 4 years. Vote.
Woohoo!
What he said.
And just to clarify, we have a primary here in 5 days where you
Yes.
can exercise, 4 days where you can exercise that right. So you may want to do it even more than every 4 years.
And
Although
early
certainly
voting.
every 4 years is especially important.
Early voting has started already.
Yes.
Yes.
So yes, let's start right here and then we're going to grab a question from the back.
Thank you for your insights and contributions. I lived in Cape Town for many years, and it's supposed to be, you know, the first city that may be without water, but the people in Cape Town have really gotten behind it and are addressing the issue so that they can go through at least 2019 right now. And I guess my question for you, and it came out of your talking about how difficult it is to get people to make the changes that are necessary. And we're seeing the frequency and force of more and more of the climate events, extreme climate events here. How much do you think people have to be impacted before they really make a change? In other words, that we are not in Houston, we are not in Miami, we are not in Montecito in California, we're not in the wildfires there. So what difference does it make of not being impacted as much or being impacted more in a people's decision to make the extreme changes that we need to make here?
Try that
Sure.
one.
That's a good question.
That's a great question, and I'd say I don't know, but I think that what needs to happen is we need to make the choices easy. We need to make it easier to take transit or walk or ride a bike versus driving a car. Easier and cheaper and more convenient to do those things. We need to make it just a no-brainer to make all of our buildings super efficient and use daylighting. We just need to make that this typical way of doing business and make that the easiest path of no resistance. And there's lots of different policy options and programs and ways to do that. But it's a great question. I don't know. And I think that some of the research points that Chicago is well positioned when it comes to climate change. There might be climate refugees that come here because we have such a great water supply, because we will have hotter days, but it won't be as bad as what we're going to see down in the southern U.S. So I think we need to just find ways to make it easier to do the less impactful thing.
Can I take? Oops. Don't want that to fall down. You've definitely touched on something that I have found frustrating in the Midwest, for sure. The B Corp community is global, and I go to global B Corp retreats, and I'm with my tribe, and it's really amazing, and I get really inspired, and I come back here, and I'm like, we're in Illinois, we're one of the largest cities in the country, and yet we've only got 35 B Corps in the whole story. Now, I'm obviously doing this through the lens of B Corps, but the reality is I also see a lot of kind of just not excitement or not galvanization around the idea of sustainability. And most people are thinking about it as like, oh, I have to turn my thermostat down, so that means I'm going to be cold and have to wear a sweater all the time. And instead, as a company that gets paid for creative thinking, we like to think about it as a catalyst for innovation, and thinking about like, okay, well, how can we turn this idea on its ear and think about creative problem solving? And there's so many startups coming out right now that are doing things like packaging out of mushroom spores and like all of this kind of crazy stuff that's happening, and it's really exciting and really vibrant. And I think that's the thing that is going to engage, at least in the business community, incite imagination and also inspire people to make change happen quickly. That's.
Any other? I'll just share that a lot of the research on climate change suggests that there's not an effective link between the places that are impacted and the mobilization. And a lot of it has to do with the challenge that we face in climate change, that even if your area is taking a massive approach to this, in the scheme of the world, it will not impact how your area actually is impacted by climate change. So, it's a classic free rider challenge in an economic game.
Seth, I actually did have something.
I'm
So
so sorry, I did not mean.
no, I just thought of it with your comment there. I guess, while it's true, Amy's point, Tim's point about we need to make it easier, we need to find these as creative problem solving, we need to create nudges, if you want to use behavioral economics, we need to find ways to make the lower carbon action the optimum action, right, in the view of whoever the action taker is. But to suggest that we need to have some tipping point that's going to get us there, I'm not sure that I can think of many cases where that's kind of worked ever, where we've been able to connect values to action. We all have very strong values. Each of us here in this room, we could sit it down and write it on a piece of paper, and yet every day we take actions that don't reflect those values. So I think, unfortunately, we've never really solved that
As a species.
problem as a species in a bigger format. And really, it's about trying to take away all of the uncertainty around the individual actions and not necessarily trying to get the big victory that gets us over the hump. Because if we're there, that's a very catastrophic scenario to try to. If we're at that point, I kind of don't shudder to think. So.
I saw a lot of hands, so let's move here, and then we'll kind of move across the room just for our microphone caretaker here. And tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm a community person, Loyola alumni. We're running out of landfill, and we don't have much left. There's a lot of problems with recycling in big cities. San Francisco seems to be doing well. The problem of plastics being drawn into the oceans, dumping ground, the garbage is just going into the oceans, even in the Great Lakes. What kind of corporate answer or city answers are being done to alleviate this? Recycling program in general.
I can try that. Thanks for your question. And can everyone still hear me? Okay. Yes, I think that waste and plastics is certainly another challenge we haven't touched on. In Chicago, I'd say as a city, we're probably behind a few other cities on that issue. And one thing that did happen a few years ago is that the recycling program was expanded and rolled out so that every resident and every business now has access to a recycling program. That wasn't the case just 5 years ago. So we're making some changes, we're making some steps to improve, but I think we have a ways to go. And so I think that tackling the issue of plastics is another big one. The city did, just 2 years ago, did a new tax on plastic bags, so that's a new policy that came out. Some research done in partnership with one of the other universities showed that that did have a pretty big impact, and people did reduce their plastic bag use by somewhere around 30 to 40%. So we need more of that, frankly. We need to see some more of that type of action.
I'll just add from the business side, I think often sustainability and CSR gets siloed away in a little corner and thrown a little pile of cash every year, and that's really the wrong way to think about it. When you look at a company like Method, who has a soap company down on the south side, they're starting to use ocean plastic in all of their bottles. Patagonia uses garbage to make some of their clothing. Those kinds of things, it's amazing if you build, that kind of thinking into the DNA of your supply chain. It's amazing the opportunities you'll come up with to say, oh, great, there's a lot of opportunities here that we have to think creatively about our waste stream and how we actually utilize the materials in it. And so I think that level of, if more businesses were thinking about that and integrating sustainability not as a siloed department, but more as a kind of something that is within their DNA, you have a lot more opportunity to make change happen quickly.
So one of the things that we've seen within the business world, within offices, is fascinating, which is with some clients, we're able to say to the people that work in the space, you have to empty your own garbage every day from your desk. Guess what happens to the amount of garbage that they produce? So, but what that gets to is put a cost, whether it's time or effort or money, on reckless waste, and it will go down. We've seen it happen in office spaces.
Thank you. Our next question is right back here. Oh, the person standing.
I'm a retired faculty person from here, haven't worked out yet.
I did.
And I think that one of the actions that consumers can take is to choose renewable energy sources. This, however, is something that is not simple to decide which one. So how do you, as large corporations or as cities, identify the sources, compare them, and make the decision?
I'll leave that to
Tim
you.
may, okay. I thought you were going to start
No,
with your,
no.
It has to have a B Corp logo on it.
Right, that is for sure.
Yeah, right. It has to have the FLICKR logo on it. So we're in a very rapidly changing time in the power sector, both on what you can do on your own site, but also how you procure your energy and what sort of choices you make on what terms, so how long you do that for. It is not, unfortunately, it is not easy, and it's not for the faint-hearted. There are new solutions coming down the path, but I do want to just sort of step back for a second and just say, as you prioritize, sort of like in the last question, reduce, reuse, recycle, right? You want to focus on reduction first, and then how you reuse or recycle. With energy, it's really about energy efficiency first. So what steps are you taking? There's lots of terrific resources available for homeowners to connect directly to efficiency audits or retrofit programs. And then, what can you do? What can you generate on your own site? There's terrific resources. There's a site called Energy Sage where you can go in and get a lot of bids directly to you if you want to do rooftop solar, if you have your own building and you have a place for those panels. So there are some other solutions to start with the other. I mean, we are in a deregulated market, so you can choose your vendor, but choosing the vendor, the quality of that vendor, the change over time, the term, it can get complicated quickly. I would definitely direct everybody to Citizens Utility Board, CUB. They have the best resources to help guide you in that decision making.
You just stole my answer, so
Oh.
I'm not going to say anymore.
Can we, perfect, yeah, you should hand out the mic and then people will be ready. That's awesome. Thank you for a creative innovation.
All right, I'm Abby. I'm a senior environmental science student here at Loyola. I'm really interested in corporate sustainability because I think that's a great way, to have a widespread influence. But I'm also interested in, particularly, city governments that are doing a lot of really cool stuff, like the city of Chicago. And one of the things that I always tell people about why I'm interested in this, as opposed to any other, part of the field of sustainability, is that when big companies and cities start implementing these sustainable changes, that it kind of trickles down and starts to influence, daily lives of individuals. And I like to think that, but I've never really exactly been told that is a correct assumption. It works for me. Like, I'm going to go, I feel like a lot of people in this room pick to support a company that is sustainable, or, a city that's sustainable, but that might just be a little IES bias. So I guess, have any of you guys seen, in your day-to-day life, at your companies or in the city, any situations where the programs that you've implemented have really started to affect individual and community actions?
Let me talk a little bit about the B Corps. I know I'm going to sound like a commercial for B Corps again, but we have a little B in a circle that goes on a lot of B Corp products, and because the assessment that we take is hard as hell, and you have to go through it every 2 years. I mean, we just went through it for the 4th time. We got audited by B Lab, which means we had to prove all of the documentation on all that stuff. And it's a really rigorous assessment, and anybody who's gone through it looks at you and they're like, no. And they know the pain of all of that, but they also know, because it's so rigorous, that when you see that stamp on that product, whatever it is, that there's a lot of thought and effort and engagement within that company to adhere to those standards that went into it. So we talk a lot about like buying from other B Corps. We have a policy at my company to buy from B Corps first. And so we have that conversation all the time within the company, and that has definitely trickled down into people being like, oh, they see the B on, almond milk or something like that, and they're like, oh, what's that? and kind of talk just in general about like sharing what companies are doing what, because it is, per the last question, it is really difficult to figure out how to make more conscientious choices on the things that you purchase and buy. And so in being part of a community like that, I have found, and for our team, has found that definitely helps, for sure. Any other?
You go ahead. Okay. You go ahead. I think that, speaking on behalf of cities, there's definitely, I don't know if I'd use the term trickle down, but there's definitely things that cities can do to impact the decisions and maybe even lifestyles of the people who live and work in that city. So just a few years ago, the city rolled out its Divvy program. How many of you have ever ridden on a Divvy bike? Cool.
They're heavy.
Yeah, they're heavy, I know. I usually use my own personal bike, but when I need it, I use a Divvy. And so that's just one very, very tangible example. And I don't have the numbers on ridership, but it's way up there. It continues to grow. The mileage that people are biking now has definitely risen since that program rolled out. And in just the last 5 years or so, there's been over 100 miles of bike lanes added to the city. All over the place, and those are dedicated bike lanes. You'll see them everywhere. And if I bike from my house to my office, I can do it on a bike lane almost the whole way now, which is very cool. So, there's those kinds of decisions when it comes to infrastructure that I think really can make a difference that cities are making.
I guess to get back to that question, it kind of depends. To Amy's point, there are things that cities can do that really, allow more sustainable behavior to take place. There can be infrastructure barriers, there can be legal barriers, right? If building codes or other city ordinances don't allow certain behavior, cities can be a really, unfortunate blockade to taking action. But businesses can also be really critical in helping sort of make things available, bring them to scale. I'm thinking of the example right now of purchasing large renewable energy agreements, power purchase agreements they're called. And it was really businesses, the large Fortune 100 businesses that went out and sort of helped make it so those deals are now available to much smaller electricity users like universities and smaller businesses. But I'll go back to my time at the city just for a second, when we were able to sort of put ordinances in place to get people to hold more water on their site. We saw the costs of green roofs and the cost of permeable concrete go down fourfold, right? So there was a market was developed because of city action. We did it on our own project, so we paid sort of the first cost. We paid the city paid, when I was the city. We had to pay some of those first costs to make sure those technologies were able to be used and how they'd be used properly. But also then once you're able to show that there's a market and there's going to be a demand, then the vendors come in and will provide the service. So different folks can have a role, ownership, in sort of bringing things to scale.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't just mention there's some really interesting research on how we make consumer decisions. And essentially, we're not that far off from businesses in that people have a preference for social responsibility, but they act on that preference where they believe the product is actually going to be better for them. So, for example, they did a study on organics, and they have all these different benefits potentially from an environmental perspective, but the impetus to actually buy it was a belief that your body was better nourished.
So Amy mentioned the Chicago benchmarking ordinance, and I think that's pertinent here because it's a great example of what a city can do that costs virtually nothing but has a major impact on energy. And all it is publish information, So typically buildings today are part of a program called Energy Star, which is a wonderful rating system. And in one single number, you know how energy efficient a building is. And so the city decided, well, let's let everyone else know that. We're not publishing in lobbies yet, we should be. But it was a big fight because buildings that are not energy efficient were like, we don't want everybody to know how bad we are. And the rest of us were saying, we do want to know, everybody to know how bad you are. And just by, I guess, shaming them that way, you can have an impact. And one of the things we've learned is when a building staff focuses on something like energy, they know it's being measured, it goes down. So when a building signs up for Energy Star, if they do nothing else, their energy starts going down 2 to 3% per year. Just because the staff is now focused on it. They have a score. There's something they can shoot for. So in Chicago, it's even bigger. You shoot for it and everybody's going to see it. That has a huge impact. So that's a simple one.
Nothing like a good public shaming.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Nena. I'm a researcher at NORC at the University of Chicago. And my question is primarily for Amy. I just wanted to get a sense of what sorts of work are you at the City Energy Project doing around climate change as a public health issue? And to what extent do the city leaders that you work with understand it as such?
That's a great question. I think that city leaders and others are just starting to scratch the surface there. In the green building world, most people have heard of LEED, which is a certification you can get for a building that says this is a very green building. It looks at energy use, it looks at water use, it looks at things like, is it near a transit stop, does it have a place where you can park bikes, and it looks at a bunch of different things. You get points, and then you get that certification. But there's a new certification that's starting to take hold called WELL, which is looking at kind of the health impacts of buildings. Does it have, we talked about the daylighting, does it have access to that? Does it have, if there's a cafeteria, is it serving some healthy food options? Are there enough places to fill up your water bottle? I mean, there's all kinds of different things you can look at within the building sector and how that impacts the health of the occupants. And of course, it looks at indoor air quality and the chemicals and things used in the property and things like that. So that's a new standard that's kind of starting to take off now, and I think there's a lot of attention that's going to be paid to that going forward as that does start to take off. In addition, I think that there's a general recognition that most things that you do in the sustainability world are going to reduce pollution, and some of that is going to impact health. I mentioned the asthma connection. That's certainly a very tangible one. But I think that, we just don't have as much of the research and the data that we need to make that case and to make it strongly, so that we need to do more work in that area.
So I mentioned the Harvard study that was done in 2015, and this is a great lead into that. So I just want to share a statistic with you. One of the major things they measured was carbon dioxide. That's what you exhale. And what they found in the study is carbon dioxide goes up, productivity goes down. So what it means for a building manager is just bring in more fresh air. But they had a statistic that's astounding. To reach the absolute ideal level of CO2 in the workplace, on average would cost $42 per person per year. The productivity improvement value is $6,500 per person per year. So math students, that's an ROI of about 17,000%. That's really good. Really, really good.
You think you're going to invest in that?
Yeah.
We have a question up here right now. Great, can we start with you, and then we'll go right in front of him to you.
My name is Brody Dean. I'm a student here at Loyola. I have a question specifically for Tim. With your experience in the technological field, I was wondering if you had any idea of sustainable initiatives that are being developed through blockchain and cryptocurrency technology, given that currently the development of them is already consuming as much energy as Denmark. And if not, perhaps maybe you could speak to sustainability initiatives and the development of new technologies.
Yeah, wow, that's a loaded one. Yeah, I heard country of Iceland, as much energy use as the country of Iceland, but yeah, that's I know that because of the level of transparency that's done in blockchain, there are sustainability and green initiatives happening. I think there's a few of them happening. I'm not too familiar with them. There are green tech groups. I think there's one in Chicago. There's several within the B Corp community as well. They are happening. I think some of them are still nascent. Some of them are startups, like Rubicon is a startup that has been getting good funding, and they basically are redefining the waste stream. So right now, because some of the large waste companies like Waste Management and Republic and stuff, because they own landfills, there's a vested interest in when you use their services that the things that you throw away go to those landfills. And so Rubicon has been basically created, they're a software company, and they've created a software tool that allows you to redefine your waste stream and get all of that stuff into as much as either recycled or reuse or upcycled venues or at resources as possible. There's a number of that kind of stuff going on. I'm not too 100% involved in that here in Chicago, but I do know that it is happening.
Can we come to your question?
Hi, Laura Castillo from Disney University. I just wanted to ask, I know on our campus personally, it's been pretty hard to break that bubble of environmental issues aren't just relevant to environmental studies students. So how do you break that and kind of educate students across all fields that this is something that our school believes in and across all majors we should all take into consideration? And then along that, how do you continue to educate your employees every day on things as simple as recycling?
Yeah, so it's sort of two questions. One of them is the tactical one of, the second question is how do you, try to get people to do the kinds of behaviors, the kinds of actions that they get to take every day. Some of that we sort of referred to or talked about a little earlier. Let's try to make it the easier choice. But I think I go back to for the first question, make it part of the identity of the institution. So Xavier, like Loyola, is a Jesuit institution that's committed to social justice, and so sustainability, I think, is very much part of that. Thank you to Pope Francis for Laudato Si, where I think that argument, if there ever was an argument that social justice and sustainability were not connected, I think that argument was put to bed. I think it's clear that when we help the planet, we help people, and vice versa. So I think trying to go forward, not trying to change someone's identity, but trying to find aspects of their identity that connect to the kinds of behavior and actions and motivations that you're interested in is the right sort of psychological, behavioral psychology strategy to employ. That's what we try and do here. We try and find folks who are naturally predisposed to taking action, and we try and make those sustainable actions, or predisposed to care of self, care of others, and we try to make sure that sustainability is included in that care. So whatever elements of identity the groups are that you target, and it's hard to do it as a big group. We have it incorporated into all of our student orientation. We have it incorporated into all of our HR onboarding, so our new employees. We have it somewhat incorporated into our onboarding for faculty, although I think I have some work to do there. Certainly all of our big events, like these 2 days, highlighting zero waste events, the vegetarian menu, things like that really showcase that we're committed to sustainability as an institution. Those are the ways. And then, just fail a lot of times because you're not going to get everything perfect and people are going to call you out, and it gives you a chance to do it better the next time. The nice thing about working at a university is that you get to do it again next year.
I can actually add one quick little thing for business on that side. I think businesses are notoriously terrible at telling compelling sustainability stories. I think many of them do them for compliance reasons, and they end up being a PDF report that's buried somewhere on their website and is filled with really boring statistics. So I think if there are any English majors here or any writing majors in the room, helping companies tell really compelling sustainability stories is a way to, make that have that story hit home to people who are applying there or work there or are customers of those companies. And I don't, because of what I was talking about earlier with CSR and sustainability being kind of siloed away in most organizations, they don't really do a good job. So there's a lot of opportunity there for improvement.
Is that okay? We'll take these two and then we'll come over to you. And I think those will probably be our three final.
I'm Baharin. I'm a student here at Loyola, and I'd like to know how are we going to convince the working class that there's jobs in renewable energy over the traditional methods like coal and other stuff?
Anybody want to? The opportunities.
Well, the good news is renewable energy is becoming the dominant form of energy in the world, generating capacity since 2014. More of it is renewable than non-renewable. So the trend is going the right way, and that's because the economics are there. So I don't think you need to worry too much. I think we are headed the right direction in a lot of different ways: solar, biogas, geothermal, ground source heat, all these things, as they become more economically viable, and they're taken over. I think the good news is I think we're on our way. It's going to happen.
Can we go to your question?
Hi, my name is Reed. I'm the founder of Scale It Up Sustainability Training for Women Entrepreneurs. So I'm focused on startups and entrepreneurs. From the city of Chicago, and maybe this is a question for those of you in your businesses, they benefit, okay, so you're still in. But for example, the thousands and thousands of small businesses typically do not benefit. And the reason they don't benefit, one of the reasons is because a lot of them rent, and then the landlords have to implement, and the actual small businesses pay. So there's no one really benefits from improvements.
It's a struggle.
Can you give me some idea of what can be done about that, or what is being done about that?
Sure.
Start.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I think the technical term we've used is split incentives, so that if you you make your building more energy efficient and you're a landlord, but your tenant is responsible for paying the energy bill, then you don't have an incentive to do anything because you're not going to get the benefit. So we've been tackling this in different ways. There are some programs from, backing up, there are programs created by state law that require the utilities to provide energy efficiency programs. Utilities will come, they'll come and walk through and do a free audit of certain types of buildings. They'll come and actually change light bulbs. If you have really old light bulbs, they'll give you more efficient ones. There's all kinds of programs available, and they're trying to make some of those programs available to tenants that are leasing that space. So that you can have the utility come and help you with your lighting, help you with your plug load, the things that go and are plugged into the outlet, and make them all more efficient. There's also, sometimes the barrier is cost. So there's an upfront cost to doing some of these things, but then you save money on your utility bill over time. But often you don't have the money to pay for that upfront cost. So there's something called on-bill financing, which is a nerdy sounding term, but basically it's like you pay it, you get the money from the utility and you pay it back on your utility bill over time, so that it gets over that initial barrier of not having enough money right up the beginning to pay for something that's more efficient. So we're starting to see some of these things roll out. And then the final thing I'd say is that some landlords are kind of seeing this, even though they may not pay all the utility bills, they still see it as an advantage to do these types of projects, because that means that their tenants are going to be happier. In some cases, your spaces are going to be better heated and cooled. Maybe you have better ventilation, better air quality, more fresh air coming in. Your tenants are happier. They're going to stay there longer. So some landlords are starting to do these types of projects because of those benefits as well.
Can we go to your question?
Hi, my name is Cameron. I am a student here. I'm actually in Seth's social entrepreneurship class. I'm actually working on my own startup that takes entrepreneurship and corporate social responsibility education and helps high schoolers apply that to their high school setting rather than a company. And so I just wanted to get your guys' take on how do you think we can get youth involved in these movements when they don't have dollars to spend and they don't have votes? How do we prepare them for when they're making choices like colleges and where they're going to buy their groceries or what they're going to buy, like where they're going to spend their money and their time? How do we prepare them to make better choices?
Well, they think of answers. I'll acknowledge I have a 7-year-old, and she's the reason that we compost. And it was because in her school, people like you visited and told her, and then it was an innovation at home soon afterwards. So I'm living proof, even though I believed in it, that the younger generation sometimes can be quite incisive.
Does she like worms?
She likes them when she doesn't have to take care of the issues that come with them. So I'm eager for your thoughts as a panel. How do you engage the next generation? I mean, how do cities think about, the K through 12 programs? I know that they're engaged there. As you go and we try to recruit out of high schools for Loyola, how do we present this sustainability work?
Yeah, I think we see a lot of examples. I'm thinking of, students coming into Loyola or some of the high schoolers that we give tours to. They come and they're already sort of working in a class or in a club or something. I think we need, to give those schools, those programs more credit than maybe we do. Those things are already happening. I have a first and a fifth grader, and we actually chose the home we had here in the city because our elementary school is the only elementary school in Chicago Public Schools that has an ecology program, which is funded by the parents. We fundraise to pay for the ecology teacher, but it's Waters Elementary. We'd love to have you. But it is, I will say, similar to other changes, large cultural shifts that we've seen over time. I mean, I think I notice it in the students that work with me as interns, as students in the Institute of Environmental Sustainability. They're more comfortable with concepts of climate change, of some of the environmental issues that we face, but they're also, of course, much more open to innovation and solutions-minded thinking, and maybe impatient, more impatient. We tend to have fairly polite students here at Loyola. Sometimes I think that's to our detriment. We'd like to see some urgency to move us forward, not only as an institution, but in the communities where we're active. So I encourage you to find ways to sort of push back when you say that, when an institution says, or a business says, or a government says, this is as far as we can go. Ask why. So, and that goes for all ages. I may just see it sometimes more in the folks that are coming up.
So we're going to take this as our last question right here.
Yes, I was just wondering, what do you see as the role of religion in all of this?
I can take that one.
All right, government's taking it.
That is a really good question, and I think it in a lot of ways, it does become a personal question. But for me personally, I do see that these issues do have a moral, ethical, social justice component that certainly ties into my spiritual beliefs. And so I think that you could see that in different denominations, that you can see that many of the denominational leaders have taken that stand and have come out publicly and made that connection very clear. So it certainly varies a lot, but I think that from what I've seen and some of the spiritual people that I've seen, you can take this seriously and see some of these choices really become part of a spiritual practice. I hope that helps answer. I can give one example. Like we mentioned the Pope Francis and the what's the
encyclical.
The encyclical that was issued a few years ago on this issue. I also saw this year, it's currently the Lenten season, and the Church of England put out something this year for what should you give up for Lent, and it focused completely on giving up plastics. Mm-hmm. And every day there was a different tip of the whole Lenten season of something you can do to give up and reduce your dependence on plastic. So there's another example that I just saw recently.
Do you see it as a necessary condition?
Do I see it as necessary?
Yeah, religion is necessary to this whole conversation.
I don't know if I'd say it's necessary, but I think there certainly is a role for it. Absolutely. To be there. And I think amongst those who are religious and do have that spiritual practice, that there's a clear tie.
So I know we're running out of time, but I'll just sort of quickly, for those of us, right, that are here at Loyola, there is a new examen that was put out. We were able to walk through it a little bit yesterday in a workshop, which was terrific, but it gives you a chance from a faith-based perspective to sort of reflect on our commitments to creation and in light of Laudato Si and other Catholic pieces. But I'll just say personally, because I do think it very much becomes a personal question. I grew up very much in a church community that was all about peace and justice, or peace and justice activists, really, and that was sort of how I became comfortable in my skin. But as I grew, my interests were around the environment, were around these topics, and so wherever your morality or your action or your motivation comes from, you can evolve and you can change on where it's directed or where it's oriented. So I went from being a anti-war warrior to environmental warrior, I guess.
Well, so I said last question, but I actually wanted to give the panelists a quick chance for a parting thought. And I'd love for each of you to share either what you see as the greatest challenge or the greatest opportunity for this We Are Still In movement in the 5 years to come.
Diversity and inclusion. I think that just in general, being inclusive overall is probably a big challenge and something that we need to address right away.
Thank you. Our panel may be an evidence of that.
There was a great article in MIT Technical Review this week about sort of the progress we've made on clean energy. You read about it every day, the new megawatt, GM committed to this project or whatever. But what that article did was put it in context of where we need to be to get to our Paris goals. We are many, whatever you call it, many measures short of where we need to be. Let alone the new power generation we need on the grid globally, we're not even keeping up with that for clean energy. So while there's incredible successes, economic and infrastructural successes around clean energy in this country, and especially in some of those growing economies, we cannot be lulled into some sense of satisfaction. It needs to be 100 times more than what we're doing right now on clean energy to address climate.
Oh, man.
Guess that's the end.
Wah, wah.
Probably just as well. Is it still working?
Yeah.
So we all have friends. I have ex-friends who don't believe in man-made climate change. And how do you talk to these people? So I have an exercise for you. I want you to try this. Go onto Google and Google organizations that believe in man-made climate change and make a list. Then Google organizations that do not believe in man-made climate change and take a list. Compare those two lists and then look up the definition of credible and not credible. And you will find, I think it will convince you more than anything else and maybe help you talk to those others.
Better yet, go to ecosia.com and make your search there, because they'll plant a tree every time you do the search.
Perfect. Funny.
All right, our last word, Amy.
Oh, boy. I don't know. I wish I could just say ditto, because all of that was really good advice. But I think it goes back to the question about how to inspire young people and how to get everyone involved. Obviously, the people in this room have an interest in this topic, but we need everyone to really get involved. And we need to make this, to bring it to scale, we really need this on everyone's radar screen. So it is a tough question. I think it goes back to finding why you're passionate in something and understanding that, and then going and doing something about it, getting involved in a community group or a nonprofit, or maybe just on this campus if you're a student here. Finding a way to get involved, whatever that may be, and finding and coming up with those new ideas. I heard the words innovation and entrepreneurial and small business and high school students and getting them to be entrepreneurs, and I think that is the way to go. Certainly we have a lot of solutions at our fingertips and we need to keep deploying those, but we need to also be creative and think about new ideas too.
Well, so, I mean, just to finish off, what you've described is that we are still that we are orders of magnitude away from where we need to be. And looking out in the audience, most of you are the future. And we are really excited for how you all can be, just a joke to try to end with a little bit of fun. We're really excited by how you can help to build that world. And so I just want to shamelessly advertise that our Baumhart Center, which is new in operation here, is at the business school with the goal of how do we leverage strategy to impact these issues at scale. And we're excited to work with you if you're interested in building a future business or thinking about how cities or institutions can strategically address these issues. Thanks to our incredible panelists. Let's give them a round of applause.